2,000 years ago, Afghanistan was one of the most important places on earth. Not a war zone, not a forgotten land, but a thriving center of power, culture, and wealth where the world came together. And then it disappeared. Imagine stepping into a land so alive, so brilliant, so full of color and sound that you would never guess the world would one day forget it ever existed. A place where the air smells of saffron and cedar smoke, where merchants speak 5 languages before noon, where ideas from China, India, Persia, and Greece all meet in one place, and something entirely new is born. This is Afghanistan, not as you know it today, but as it was 2,000 years ago. The land itself has always been dramatic. That hasn't changed. In the north, wide plains stretched out beneath a pale blue sky, flat enough to see storms rolling in from 100 miles away. To the east, the Hindu Kush mountains rose so high and so steep, they seemed to belong to another world entirely. Jagged teeth of rock and ice cutting through the clouds. In the south, dry desert basins baked under a relentless sun, and threading through all of it, rivers, the Amu Darya, the Helmand, the Kabul River, carrying water down from the mountains and giving life to everything they touched. It was not an easy landscape, but it was a powerful one. The valleys between the mountains were impossibly fertile. Farmers grew wheat, barley, and grapes. Orchards of pomegranate and apricot lined the hillsides. Villages clustered around water sources, and from those villages grew towns. And from those towns, over centuries, grew cities of real ambition. The animals were as wild and varied as the terrain. Snow leopards moved through the high passes. Eagles circled above the valleys. Camel trains snaked along ancient paths, worn smooth by 10,000 years of human feet. This was a land of extremes, and the people who lived here had learned to thrive in all of them. To understand why ancient Afghanistan mattered so much to the ancient world, you have to think about geography, not from a map, but from the ground. If you were a merchant, a general, a monk, or a philosopher living 2,000 years ago, and you wanted to move between the great civilizations of the East and the West, between Rome and China, between India and Persia, there was no path around Afghanistan. There was only through it. The mountain passes of the Hindu Kush were not gentle. They were brutal in winter and narrow in summer, and yet people crossed them constantly, because on the other side was trade, was profit, was survival, was power. This placed Afghanistan at the center of what we now call the Silk Road, though it was never really a single road. It was a web of routes, a living network of paths that connected the entire known world, and Afghanistan was the knot at the middle. Caravans arrived carrying silk from China, spices from India, glassware from the Mediterranean, gold from Persia. They stopped in the great cities of this land to water their animals, repair their goods, exchange currencies, and rest. And in doing so, they left something behind: ideas, religions, art, language, and culture. The ancient Greeks arrived here with Alexander. They built cities, they intermarried, they stayed. And long after Alexander died and his empire fractured, a Greek kingdom held on in this part of the world, the Greco-Bactrian kingdom, a realm so far from Athens that most people in Greece probably forgot it existed. But it was real. It was prosperous. It was making coins so beautiful that historians still consider them among the finest ever struck in the ancient world. Buddhism arrived here from India and spread westward and northward along the same trade routes. Zoroastrianism lived here long before that. Hinduism left its fingerprints on the language and the art. And then Greek philosophy and Persian architecture and Central Asian nomadic energy all pressed in from different directions. The result was a culture that belonged entirely to itself, a blend so thorough, so complete, that it produced something scholars today call Gandharan, civilization, a world unto its own. The city of Balkh, ancient Bactria, was one of the great cities of the ancient world. Walk through it 2,000 years ago, and you would have seen wide streets, market stalls overflowing with goods from a dozen countries, temples and shrines rising above the rooftops, and people from everywhere. Silk traders from the east haggled with Persian merchants. Buddhist monks in saffron robes walked past Greek-style colonnades. Children played in courtyards while their parents conducted business in 3 languages at once. The city smelled of bread and incense, of animals and spice. It was cosmopolitan in the truest sense of the word, a city that belonged to the world because the world passed through it. Further east, the valley of Bamiyan cradled something almost unbelievable. Into the face of towering sandstone cliffs, thousands of monks and craftsmen had carved entire cities of monasteries, meditation halls, and sanctuaries. The caves honeycombed the rock for miles. Pilgrims came from across Asia to pray here, to study here, to spend months or years living quietly in the cool stone chambers above the valley floor. And at the center of it all, 2 colossal statues of the Buddha had been carved directly into the cliff face, one standing nearly 180 feet tall. They had been painted in vivid colors: red, gold, blue. In the afternoon light, with the green valley below and the brown mountains above, the effect must have been overwhelming, not just impressive, transcendent. Art flourished everywhere. The sculptors of the Gandhara tradition produced work that drew on Greek realism and Indian spirituality simultaneously. Figures so lifelike, so graceful, so emotionally present that they feel modern even now. The hands, the faces, the folds of cloth, all done in stone with a precision that demanded years of practice and a culture that valued beauty deeply enough to invest in it. This was a world that built things meant to last, things meant to speak across centuries. Trade brought wealth, wealth brought power, and power in the ancient world always attracted the attention of ambitious empires. Afghanistan had always been contested land. The Persians held parts of it under Cyrus the Great. Alexander marched through it and tried to conquer it, and his successors fought over it for generations. But there was a difference between conquest and destruction. For much of the ancient period, the empires that held this land understood its value. They built roads and irrigation systems. They maintained order along the trade routes. They let the cities grow. Under the Kushans, a dynasty that rose from Central Asian nomadic roots and built an empire across what is now Afghanistan, Pakistan, and northern India, the region reached perhaps its greatest height. The Kushan kings were powerful, wealthy, and remarkably tolerant. They minted coins showing Greek gods, Persian deities, and Buddhist symbols all at once, as if to say, all of this is ours, and we embrace all of it. Trade moved, knowledge flowed. Buddhist missionaries traveled through Kushan territory and carried their teachings all the way to China. The Silk Road hummed with activity. Cities expanded. Monasteries multiplied. Life, for a significant portion of the population, was stable, fed, and rich with meaning. It is not a golden age born of legend. The evidence is in the ground. In the coins, the statues, the ruins of buildings, the manuscripts, the trade records, this was real. This happened. But great civilizations rarely fall from a single blow. They erode. They are worn down, slowly at first, then faster, then all at once. The Kushans eventually weakened. A new Persian empire, the Sassanids, pushed in from the west. Nomadic confederacies pressed from the north. The trade routes that had given the cities their lifeblood began to shift, rerouted by political conflict, by war, by the simple fact that the world was changing. Then came the Huns, waves of mobile warriors from the steppes who swept through Central Asia with the ferocity the settled cities could not easily absorb. The Kidarites, the Hephthalites. These groups shattered the Kushan order and imposed their own, harsher and less interested in the kind of cosmopolitan tolerance that had allowed Gandharan civilization to bloom. Cities were sacked, trade declined, monasteries were abandoned as the flow of pilgrims and patronage dried up. The great Buddhist communities of Bamiyan and the Kabul Valley held on, but the world around them was less stable, less prosperous, less interconnected than it had once been. And then, in the 7th century, something changed that would echo forward through all of subsequent history. The armies of the early Islamic Caliphate arrived from the west, driven by a force of religious conviction and military momentum that had already swept across Persia and the Middle East. The conversion of Afghanistan to Islam was not instantaneous. It took generations, but it was ultimately total. The old temples were closed or converted, the monasteries emptied. The statues that had once drawn pilgrims from across Asia, including those extraordinary Buddhas carved into the cliffs at Bamiyan, were no longer maintained, no longer venerated, slowly forgotten by a population whose spiritual world had been entirely remade. Some of what was lost was physical, structures that crumbled because no one was left to repair them. Some of it was cultural, languages and traditions that simply stopped being passed down. And some of it was deliberate, the erasure that happens when one civilization consciously replaces another. By the time the medieval period arrived, much of what had made ancient Afghanistan so remarkable was already buried, under sand, under rubble, under layers of new cities built on top of old foundations. The knowledge of what had been there faded from local memory and from the memory of the world beyond. We only began recovering pieces of this story in the modern era, when archaeologists started excavating sites that had been untouched for over 1,000 years. What they found stunned them. Statues of such elegance and refinement that they had to rethink what they knew about ancient art. Cities with sophisticated urban planning, coins that told stories of religious diversity and political complexity no one had suspected, manuscripts, jewelry, trade goods from places as far away as Rome and China, found together in the same buried rooms. And yet so much was also destroyed before it could be properly studied. In the chaos of war, in ideological violence, in the simple poverty that comes from a country that has known conflict for decades. The Buddhas of Bamiyan, which had survived 1,500 years of changing rulers and religions, were demolished in 2001. The Kabul Museum was looted. Archaeological sites were dug up by looters, and the artifacts scattered to private collections around the world. Their context, the information that makes them meaningful, lost forever. What is gone is gone. There is something almost unbearable about looking at what remains. Those graceful stone faces, that elegant craftsmanship, the coins where different gods shared the same space, and realizing that this world once existed, fully alive, and is now almost entirely gone. It's a reminder that civilization is fragile, that everything we build, every city, every idea, every moment of beauty can disappear if no one is left to protect it, to remember it, to carry it forward. Ancient Afghanistan was not a forgotten corner of the world. It was a center, a place where cultures didn't collide, they blended, where East met West and created something entirely new. And yet, most of it is now dust. The mountains are still there, the rivers still flow, the passes of the Hindu Kush still catch the same morning light they did 2,000 years ago. But the people, the voices, the world that once filled this land are gone. And maybe that's the most haunting truth of all. The greatest civilizations don't just fall. They are forgotten until someone chooses to remember them again. If this story fascinated you, subscribe and join me as we uncover the lost world's history almost forgot.